The 1985 film Mask is based on the true story of Rocky Dennis, an American boy with an extremely rare bone disorder. It causes bone to build up excessively in the skull, resulting in compression of the brain. Doctors initially told him he would die before his 7th birthday, but Rocky ended up living to the age of 16. After being told he would die if he didn't change his habits, a morbidly obese Scottish man went an entire year without eating any food. The 450-pound 27-year-old only consumed multivitamins and potassium tablets for 382 days, only going number 2 once every 40 to 50 days. He set a record for the longest fast ever recorded and ended up losing 275 pounds. French chemist Antoine Lavoisier wanted to perform one last experiment before he was executed in 1792. He told his colleague he would try to blink as long as possible after being beheaded by a guillotine. Some sources say he continued to blink for up to 10 seconds afterwards. Randy Savage died from a massive heart attack while driving with his wife, as an autopsy later found his coronary artery to be 90% blocked. Just a few days before he died, Randy had a routine checkup with his doctor who suggested a heart scan, which would have easily detected the fatal blockage, but Randy decided to put it off until his next visit. Known as the Meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together when the towers collapsed on 9/11. It's not known if there are human remains inside. After failing to assassinate King Louis XV in 1757, Robert Francois Damiens was sentenced to be executed by having his skin ripped open, molten lead and sulfur poured into his wounds, and dismemberment by 4 horses. Upon hearing this, Damiens replied, "Well, it's going to be a tough day." During the execution, Damiens was reportedly still alive after all of his limbs were ripped off, so his remaining torso was burned at the stake. From the 70s to the 90s, more than 20 people were killed by postal workers in at least 40 separate incidents. It happened so frequently that going postal became a slang term for becoming exceptionally angry. This was referenced in the 1996 Jumanji movie when the hunter goes to a sporting goods store to replace his gun, and the salesman asks him, "You don't work for the post office, do you?" In June of 2007, a 6-year-old girl unknowingly sat on the poorly maintained drain of a public pool. The resulting suction from the drain caused 21 feet of her intestines to be forced out of her body. After 16 surgeries and several transplants, she tragically died 9 months later. In 2017, 16-year-old cross-country runner Patrick Cooper was participating in a mountain race in Alaska when he suddenly took a wrong turn and became lost. At some point, Patrick called his family members and informed them that he was being chased by an aggressive black bear. His mangled corpse was eventually found by another runner who went searching for Patrick after finishing the race. In the year 2000, Pakistani archaeologists announced the incredible discovery of an ancient mummy, believed to be the daughter of Persian King Xerxes the Great. This sparked a heated diplomatic dispute, with both Iran and Pakistan fighting over ownership of the amazing find. However, after closer examination, museum curators discovered that the mummy was actually a woman who died from blunt force trauma in 1996. It may have even been the victim of a violent murder. Several people were arrested for the massive hoax, but the woman's identity and the details surrounding her death remain unclear to this day. In 2002, Pennsylvania mother Brenda Heist completely disappeared after dropping her 2 kids off at school. 11 years later, she was found living with a group of homeless people in Key West, Florida. Investigators found out she was upset about an upcoming divorce and wanted to completely abandon her life as she knew it. Brenda survived by living under bridges and eating scraps of food until she got tired of running and decided to turn herself in. Her family wanted nothing to do with her since they thought she'd been dead for years, and her ex-husband was even treated as a suspect for her supposed murder. Just last year, 16-year-old Marie Antoinette Coutillo tragically died after her phone fell into the bathtub while she was on a call with her friend. She'd been charging her phone while using it and apparently dropped it in the water at some point, resulting in her electrocution. Marie was eventually found unresponsive by her parents and rushed to the hospital, but doctors were unable to save her. In 1973, 16-year-old John Paul Getty III was kidnapped in Rome, with a $17 million ransom demanded from his billionaire grandfather, J. Paul Getty. But the former richest man in the world refused to pay, suspecting that the rebellious teenager was just trying to extract money from his tycoon grandfather. As time went on, the teenager's father pleaded with his dad to send the money, but the mogul argued that his 13 other grandchildren could also become kidnapped targets if he paid. However, he was forced to change his tune when the kidnappers mailed Getty his grandson's severed ear and hair as a warning, so the billionaire negotiated the ransom down to $3 million. Paul was safely released after 5 months in captivity, but the experience left him completely traumatized, especially since his captors made him play Russian roulette several times. The teen quickly developed a drug addiction, which eventually led to a stroke caused by an overdose, and Getty was left severely disabled for the rest of his life. In 2012, Donna Summer died from lung cancer at the age of 63, even though she wasn't a smoker. The singer believed it was caused by inhaling the toxic fumes from the Twin Towers after they fell on 9/11, since the dust filled the air around Ground Zero for several months afterwards, and Summer lived nearby. In fact, around 6,400 people have since died from 9/11 related illnesses, more than double the amount that died on the actual day of the attacks. The Dani tribe in Indonesia is known to cut off parts of their fingers after the death of a loved one. In 1928, Alfred Lowenstein, the third richest man in the world at the time, completely disappeared from his private jet in the middle of a flight. After Alfred took too long to use the bathroom, his secretary went in to check on him, but the bathroom was empty and the exit door connected to it was wide open. There have been many theories put forth, but Alfred most likely opened the wrong door by accident and plunged thousands of feet to his death. Best known for playing Robbie Rotten in Lazytown, Icelandic actor Stefan Karl Stefansson was told his pancreatic cancer was inoperable at the young age of 43. He died a few months later and wanted no funeral, instead requesting to have his ashes scattered in secrecy in a distant ocean. He will always be number one. Throughout South London, you can find large sections of fence made out of stretchers from World War II. They were used by civil authorities to transport the wounded when England was bombed by the Nazis. Just 2 months after 9/11, another commercial airliner, American Airlines Flight 587, crashed into a Queens, New York neighborhood just after takeoff. 265 people were killed and several homes were completely destroyed. One of the victims had previously survived the 9/11 attacks, only to end up dying in another tragedy. In 1981, 3 young men found the murdered body of a woman laying in a roadside ditch in Ohio. She was known as the Buckskin girl because of the poncho she'd been wearing, but police struggled to identify her for decades. That was until 37 years later in 2018 when DNA analysis identified her as hitchhiker Marcia King. Her mother had still been living in the same house with the same phone number, never giving up hope that her daughter may return home one day. Marcia's murder remains unsolved, but the case is still open. In a form of doping known as boosting, wheelchair athletes with spinal injuries will sometimes intentionally injure themselves below the waist to cause their bodies to respond by raising blood pressure, thus enhancing their performance. Techniques include clamping down on a catheter to overfill the bladder, breaking toe bones, and administering electric shocks to the legs, feet, and testicles. Boosting has been completely banned by the International Paralympic Committee since 1994. Italian man Marco Mariolini earned the nickname Anorexic Hunter due to his disturbing fixation towards emaciated women. But he wasn't simply drawn to women who were already thin. He wanted to actively shape them into emaciation by pushing their bodies to extreme levels of malnutrition. He made his wife starve herself, making her lose more than 70 pounds until he eventually broke up with her once he got her pregnant. Marco then started dating a woman named Monica, whom he would punch in the stomach if she ate anything he considered excessive. He would even take her to nice restaurants where he would eat in front of her while she was forced to starve. One day Monica had enough and attacked him with a hammer before later turning herself in, only to end up facing house arrest with her monstrous partner. Marco would end up fatally stabbing her 22 times in retribution, and only spent a few years in prison before being released in 2021. By the way, I have no idea what's going on with that facial hair. It's totally unrelated to the story. Trust me, I have so many questions myself. Within seconds of the band Great White taking the stage at the Station Nightclub in 2003, faulty pyrotechnics ignited the flammable acoustic foam that surrounded the stage. Far exceeding the building's capacity, all 462 people quickly flooded the exits as the entire building was rapidly engulfed in flames. But many struggled to find the exits due to the heavy smoke, leading to a pileup at the front entrance that prevented anyone else from escaping. Multiple survivors also claimed that 2 bouncers blocked the stage door as fans attempted to escape the building, telling them that the door was only to be used by the band. In the end, 100 people lost their lives, including Great White's guitarist Ty Longley. One man named Mike Vargas managed to survive for 90 minutes inside the building. He was trampled by a mob trying to escape and only survived because he was insulated by all the bodies burning around him. He walked out with only minor burns but still suffers from severe PTSD. Amanda Eller was lost for 17 days in the Maui wilderness after a 3-mile hike turned into a full-on nightmare. She set out on foot without a phone, food, or water since she only planned to be out for a short adventure. But after veering off the trail, she wasn't able to find her way back. The 35-year-old later managed to survive a flash flood with a broken leg and suffered many hallucinations throughout the ordeal. She said she kept hearing voices that were telling her what to do if she wanted to survive. Amanda was eventually spotted by a helicopter pilot who turned a different way that nobody would normally search on a whim. In 2022, an Irish woman was hospitalized with extreme stomach pain and had to have her appendix removed after years of holding in farts around her boyfriend. Constance Fisher was a paranoid schizophrenic who murdered her 3 children in 1954 to save them from evil. She spent several years in a mental asylum before being released, only to kill 3 more of her children in 1966. The career of actor Armie Hammer quickly fell off in 2021 when several women accused him of being an abusive partner and aspiring cannibal. For example, his ex-girlfriend Courtney Vucekovich says their relationship was like dating Hannibal Lecter. She claims he genuinely tried convincing her to remove one of her ribs so that he could barbecue and eat it. In a collection of alleged messages, Armie claimed that he wanted to cut her skin and drink her blood, but that he would stitch her up again so as not to waste a perfect slave. He also wrote about wanting to pounce on her and grape her at knife point while she cried, and wanting to cut off one of her toes to keep a piece of her with him at all times. In response to these disturbing allegations, Armie was quoted saying, "I don't think that's any different than when someone looks at a baby and goes, 'Oh my God, look at those fat little legs. I just want to eat you up.'" 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After his phone was stolen in 2020, 16-year-old Kevin Bui set a Denver house on fire that he mistakenly thought was the thief's home. The blaze tragically killed 5 members of an innocent family, including 2 young kids. Bui was tried as an adult and sentenced to 60 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. In 2008, Canadian woman Marilyn Bergeron told her family that something terrible had happened but wouldn't elaborate, calling it worse than assault or witnessing a crime, and that she no longer felt safe living alone. Soon afterwards, she left her Quebec City home and completely disappeared. This last photo shows her withdrawing $60 from an ATM on the day she vanished, and she was never seen again. In the 1880s, James Jameson, heir to the Jameson Irish whiskey fortune, purchased a 10-year-old African slave girl just so he could draw her being eaten by cannibals. He claimed he only did it as a joke and didn't expect her to actually be killed. In 1983, 2 men from Missouri entered an abandoned home in St. Louis while searching for a pipe to fix their broken van. After following a horrible stench down to the basement, they found the headless body of a little girl with her hands tied behind her back. After years of investigation, she and her killer sadly remain unidentified to this day. In 2009, 25-year-old chemistry student Vladimir Likonos died after his chewing gum exploded in his mouth. He had a strange habit of dipping his gum in citric acid for extra sourness, but accidentally used an explosive powder from his chemistry experiments that was 4 times stronger than TNT. Likely caused by the reaction with his saliva or chewing pressure, the explosion blew off his jaw and led to his eventual death. According to a 2011 study, children exposed to family violence show the same patterns of brain activity as soldiers exposed to combat. Throughout Chinese history, it was common for parents to castrate their boys as a way to escape poverty. Both the shaft and the nuts would be sliced off with a knife at the same time. These castrated members of society, known as eunuchs, were considered thoroughly pure and therefore qualified as high-ranking civil servants. This disturbing system lasted until 1924, with the last Imperial eunuch dying in 1996. A 23-year-old college student from Taiwan was forced to have both of his legs amputated after suffering severe frostbite that his doctor couldn't believe was real. He claimed it was the result of being stuck outside after a bad motorcycle accident, but the truth was he'd stuck his legs in dry ice for more than 10 hours while trying to pull off a massive insurance fraud scheme. His friend and accomplice tied him to the chair, so he had no choice but to endure the excruciating ice burns. Instead of the $1.7 million payout they were hoping for, both of the young men were sent to prison for insurance fraud. This photo of Samantha Koenig was taken by serial killer Israel Keys to convince the victim's family that she was still alive, so that he could demand $30,000 in ransom from them for her safe return. But in reality, Koenig had already been dead for several weeks, and Keys had sewn her eyes open using fishing line. The family paid some of the ransom before the killer dumped Samantha's body in a lake and never contacted them again. This surveillance image shows 14-year-old Noah Donahoe riding his bike fully unclothed on the day he went missing while apparently heading to meet some friends in Belfast. 6 days later, his body was discovered in a storm drain, with an autopsy confirming drowning as the cause of death, but his family is convinced he was murdered. Earlier this year, 41-year-old Ohio mother Tamara Banks was sentenced to 9 years in prison for the death of her daughter. Banks and her husband fed the girl almost nothing but Mountain Dew through a baby bottle, causing her teeth to rot and a severe case of diabetes, which eventually killed her. During a Taiwanese concert in 2015, a large amount of colored cornstarch powder was sprayed into a crowd of 1,000 people, creating a dense dust cloud of flammable powder in the air. The powder suddenly ignited near the stage, causing a massive fireball that quickly spread throughout the crowd. Despite the fire only lasting about 40 seconds, over 500 people were injured while 17 were killed. In March of 1998, 23-year-old Virginia woman Amy Lynn Bradley was on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship to Curacao when she suddenly vanished from the balcony of her cabin around 6 a.m. The Coast Guard conducted a 4-day search in surrounding waters but found no trace of her, so authorities concluded that she simply fell overboard and drowned. But in the years since, there have been several reported sightings of Amy that suggest she may have been kidnapped and forced into human trafficking. 1 year after she went missing, a U.S. Navy sailor claimed he met a woman named Amy in a Barbados brothel who matched her description and begged him for help, but he didn't report it at the time. In 2005, an anonymous email was sent to Amy's family, containing 2 photographs of a sex worker who closely resembled Amy, but nothing ever came of it. Despite various other sightings of the woman with men holding on to her, Amy Lynn Bradley was declared legally dead in March of 2010, 12 years after her disappearance. After just one date with him in 2018, Arizona woman Jacqueline Adis allegedly sent a man over 159,000 texts over a 10-month span. Some of the texts were incredibly disturbing threats like, "I'd make sushi out of your kidneys and chopsticks out of your hand bones. I'd wear your fascia in the top of your skull and your hands and feet." Adis was later arrested for trespassing inside the man's home while he was out of the country, but she was later declared mentally incompetent to stand trial and the charges were dropped. This is the 2,000-year-old skull of Mary Magdalene on display at St. Maximin Basilica in France. It's considered to be one of the most precious relics in all of Christendom. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson drove his car into a ditch while driving home from a party. He called his parents and told them he was fine, but wasn't sure exactly where he was. Nearly 50 minutes into the call, he suddenly yelled, "Oh shit," and then went silent. He's never been seen nor heard from again. An X-ray revealed that a 300-year-old Mexican statue of Jesus has real human teeth. They're believed to have been donated by worshippers as a way to get closer to the religious figure. After killing his girlfriend with a hatchet, 30-year-old Philadelphia man William Kemmler became the first person to be executed by electric chair. While it was supposed to demonstrate the effectiveness and humanity of electrocution, the punishment went horribly wrong. They underestimated the amount of electricity needed to quickly and painlessly end a man's life, so Kemmler was still conscious after the first shock. When physicians noticed he was still breathing in agony, they hit him with a second shock that was more powerful, causing his entire body to convulse violently and start smoking. Kemmler ended up with bubbling skin, melted eyes, and a foaming mouth, and the entire room reeked of burning flesh as many spectators ended up passing out from the horror. But despite this, the electric chair would still continue to be used for more than 100 years afterwards. In 2014, author Richard Britton traveled 500 miles to find a teenage girl who left him a bad review on his recent book, then smashed a wine bottle over her head, sending her to the hospital where she nearly died. Richard was jailed for 30 months following the vicious attack. In 1971, 46-year-old New Jersey accountant John List lost his job at a bank and couldn't stand to tell his family. After a failed job search, List worried that his family would turn away from God due to a lack of stability and therefore miss out on heaven. So he felt he was left with no choice but to murder his entire family and disappear forever. He killed his wife, mother, and 3 children by gunshot before vanishing for the next 18 years. List had planned out the murder so meticulously that nearly a month had passed before anyone suspected that something was wrong. He assumed a new identity in Denver, remarried, and evaded capture for nearly 2 decades, until a neighbor finally recognized him after seeing him on America's Most Wanted. While working in his garage in 2012, Chicago man Dante Autolo accidentally shot a 3-inch nail directly into his skull. But he had no idea the nail had entered his brain until he started feeling nauseous 36 hours later, and a dozen doctors were completely stunned when they saw his x-rays. The nail was surgically removed and Dante miraculously made a full recovery, after his meth-addicted wife spread a false rumor that he was a pedophile. Australian father Bradley Lyons was kidnapped and attacked by a vigilante group of pedophile hunters. He was tortured with lighters and knuckle dusters and threatened with a shotgun in his mouth for not confessing to his crimes. At some point, the group poured hot water over Bradley's head and cut off his hand with a chainsaw since he continued to deny the false allegations. They then left him in the trunk of a hot car for 21 hours before executing him in the woods. Several people were sentenced to years in prison for the horrific murder, including Bradley's wife. For years, Kelly Ronahan was thought to be suffering from a mysterious illness that caused her to frequently lose blood and required weekly transfusions. But once doctors started catching on that Kelly was likely draining her own blood to appear anemic, she moved on to a new health issue. She allegedly started picking at her legs, putting chemicals on them, and rubbing all sorts of substances and dirt into the wounds. Soon enough, her legs got so bad that Kelly needed a muscle transplant and skin grafts to cover up the holes. After being discharged from the hospital, she continued picking at the scabs and causing further damage, eventually turning parts of her legs black. It got to the point where she nearly died from sepsis and required both of her legs to be amputated. Kelly gleefully documented her whole medical journey on social media, posting hundreds of photos and videos of her progress over the years. But in the end, she reportedly did it all for internet sympathy.